Hi, Assalamualaikum. Good morning. My name is Najla, binti Mohd Fauzi, and today I'm going to present to you guys about my topic for EPE447 oral presentations, which is comparatives and superlatives. Comparatives and superlatives is very important in describing and comparing things in English. If you notice, in everyday conversations, we often compare objects, places, people, or even events. For example, saying something is bigger, better, or more beautiful, perhaps. That's where comparatives and superlatives help us. So let's start with comparatives. So the first function is to make comparisons. We use comparative adjectives to show change or make comparisons. Basically, okay, let's look at the first example, which is I'm feeling happier now. That indicates that she or he is feeling happier now rather than before. The next function is to compare one thing with another. When we want to compare one thing with another different thing, we actually use the word than in the sentence. We put than after the comparative adjectives. Basically, the example is she is 4 days older than him, which indicates that she is older than him by 4 days. Sometimes comparatives show that something is changing continuously. In this case, we repeat the comparative with the word and. For example, the first sentence is their balloon got bigger and bigger. Amiri is looking younger and younger. So basically, which means that today Amiri looks younger, but the next day he even looks younger than before. This structure suggests that the change continues over time. And the fourth function is to show that one thing depends on one another. We can use the structure D plus comparative and D plus comparative. We use this when one situation depends on another or when one thing affects the other. For example, the higher they climb, the colder it got. The faster you drive, the more dangerous it is. This doesn't mean it's the highest or the coldest. It shows proportional change, which I will explain later on. Now let's move on to another part, which is superlatives. So superlatives are used when we want to compare one thing to a group of things. It shows the upper or lower limits of a quality. In other words, the highest, the best, the smallest, or the worst. It was the happiest day for me. My house is the largest one in our neighborhood. So, side notes, superlatives always use the word the because they refer to one unique thing that stands out from the rest. So, going back to why we use the comparative instead of the superlative plus the superlative. So, students sometimes confuse the structure, like the higher and the colder, with superlatives and try to say something like the highest, the coldest. But this is not correct actually. The pattern is not about maximum level, it's about cause and effect. It's about proportional change when one thing change and the other change too. So the correct form to use it is the higher we climb, the colder it gets. And the incorrect form, which is the vice versa, which is the highest we climb, the coldest it gets. Now we are coming to the last part, which is forming comparatives and superlatives adjectives. For one syllable word, we use ER for comparative. We put ER at the back of the word and we put EST at the back of the word for superlative. So basically, let's look at the first example here. The word tall become taller in its comparative form, and the word tall also become tallest in its superlative form, which is different. And then it's so on as the other example, which is fat, fatter, fattest, big, bigger, biggest. But if you notice that here, when a word ends with a vowel plus consonant, we double the final consonant. Like, for example here, big. Big become bigger, biggest. Basically, we double the G. And then the next one is two syllables, which is, it becomes a bit tricky for some students because we sometimes take the ER est form, and sometimes we use more or most. For example, let's see here, the first example is simple, simpler for comparative form, and simplest for superlative form. But let's look at the third example, which is tilted. It becomes more tilted for comparative form and most tilted for superlative form. For longer adjectives, with those with 3 or more syllables, we don't add endings at the back of the word. Instead, we use more and most. For example here, important become more important in its comparative form, and for superlative form, it become most important, and so on as the example goes on. And the last one is irregular form. So some adjectives do not follow any of the three rules that I have discussed earlier. These are called irregular adjectives, which is, for example, the word good. In its comparative form, it becomes better, but in its superlative form, it becomes best. It has nothing in common, and that's why all of this called irregular. There is actually no shortcut to this. You simply need to memorize this by reading books, any reading material, basically. So, as a summary, comparatives are used to compare two things, and superlatives are used to show the highest or lowest degree among a group. And we also learned the rules for forming each type, and we also looked at regular form for certain words. Now let's practice together. I'll read and explain each of the sentence, and you think of the correct comparative and superlative form. So for A, Carla is good than you at sport. So here, we need to use comparative. Why? Because there is the word than in the sentence. And for B, we like wearing the late fashion. In this case, we need to use the superlative form, which is the latest, and not the we like wearing the latter fashion. We like wearing the latest fashion. It's the correct form is superlative. And C is these trousers are comfortable than those jeans. So the word comfortable here, we need to use the comparative form, because same as the first one, we have the word than in the sentence because it shows that it compared two things in at the same time. So these trousers are more comfortable than those jeans. Here we have the answer key for each of them. So basically we can see here, for D, he is happier now than he was last year because of the word than. You are the tallest girl in class because it compares one thing with a whole group of things. And then this is the references that I used. And that's all. Thank you very much for listening. I hope you now feel more confident using comparatives and superlatives in your writing and speaking.